Welcome everybody to a DoneJS contributors meeting. It's been a good week, Julian. I'm hopefully you got to watch last week's because there was a lot of good discussion about Steel.
Yeah, I watched it on YouTube, so I got the decision or the discussion about Steel, and
plugins
I followed
and
it.
stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts about that?
I don't remember much of the last hangout, so maybe you can return I don't remember much about it. So
Okay. Cool.
The only thing I remember was that we have that problem with CSS and less, that they are dependent on Steel, and if we decouple that from Steel, we have problems because we have to initialize it before Steel is there. So you talk about that config dev or that problem. Yeah, I understand that, and my thoughts were maybe we should not decouple CSS. But because if you have another there's this config called config dependencies or config devs or something like that, and that is similar that what it is. So we have that for Steel condition. So Emmanuel did this for Steel condition, and I think we have another couple of plugins that need that. It's a little bit tricky, so I have not that answer for you.
Well, let's talk about this after we get through status.
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to go first?
So I'm busy on client work and at my office, so I had nothing to talk about. Sorry.
No problem. Your opinions are worth a lot. So when we get to topics, that'll be helpful enough. My status is I've been working for the last week on the technical highlights of CanJS 3.0 and just kind of managing things. I did fix a bug related to parsing of expressions in Stash, but that is, I think, my only technical contribution. Next week, I'm going to be working on CanJS 3.0's release article and setting up CanJS in different environments. David, you want to go next?
Yeah, I don't have too much. I was looking in some people had problems running the tests in Phantom, and there was also an issue Kevin and I were looking into with Socket.io and CanFixture, which I'm not sure if you found a good solution for, but I don't have a solution for the Phantom thing yet, but I'll be looking into that some more today. But yeah, that's been it for this week.
Awesome. Any Chasen?
Sure. So this week, the majority of my work has been organizing just developer relations and evangelism stuff, and starting to look for opportunities, both conference and meetup opportunities for next year. Not really expecting to get a whole lot more scheduled next month, but organizing everything for next year. And then I started working on the model section of the technical highlights page. And trying to get that finished up. I'll probably, I'm going to share, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm going to probably start sharing drafts with you of that today, and then finish that up by the beginning of next week, hopefully. And then are we talking about stuff for next week as well, or just status from this week?
Yeah, this week and next week.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so other than finishing up the technical highlights page, I want to go through all the other CanJS 3 pages and review them, continue on meetup and conference opportunities, and next week will be a change of month from November to December, so we'll have a report of our different stats from November.
Cool. Anybody else want to share their status?
Not really much to share, but just spent the last weeks continuing moving Bitcentive demo app to the MVP. Mostly worked on continuous deployment, got it up and running so that on production we, do the basics. We like push the static stuff to Firebase, CDN, and the non-static stuff, the SSR and the services to Heroku, and then just mostly cleaning up and getting stuff working and trying to update to the new packages and stuff. That's all we did. Cool.
So yeah, on a high level, just to kind of summarize, Adam and Ryan, what they've been working on is Bitcentive, which is it's something we're going to be using at Bitovi to kind of track contributions towards open source. But more important for the community is it's going to be an example app using Feathers and a kind of more of a document-driven data store, MongoDB, or NoSQL too is another way of. I actually like to think of it as more document-based than actually NoSQL. I think that's
You're right.
accurate. Yeah, it's a more accurate way of representing it. Because NoSQL could mean it just means not. Yeah, just the Venn diagram. It's like everything but that. And then there's something else that it's going to be doing. Speaking of documents, we're experimenting with making it so if you have like parent-child relationships, bidirectional references from parent to children, kind of like the DOM has. There's kind of an experiment in there. Also, authentication is going to be done in a much better way. So look out for that. Manuel, do you want to talk about real quick how conditional is coming?
Sure. I started working on documentation this week, but then I started working also on changing steel condition a little bit, so you don't need to expose a property, so we know which bundles to create for the interpolation syntax. And I've been having some issues with it, but I hope that I can fix it this week and then started working on some guides. And that's pretty much it. So
again, for people who are not familiar with what Manuel is working on, what we mean by steel conditional. Steel conditional is to allow conditional dependencies to load, which is really awesome to be able to say like, hey, what you can effectively say is this module might depend on some special DOM feature like mutation observers or something like that, and which doesn't exist anymore. But mutation observers do exist. I was thinking of the object observe. Anyways, you could say this module depends on mutation observers, and if the browser doesn't support it, we need to load some polyfill for that. Is a really big use case for steel conditional. The other big use case is going to be for internationalization, to say, depending on a language, we need to load these language packs and make them part of the dependency graph. So I think the goal, right, is, Manuel, it will be, we're going to make steel conditional work and then have 2 demos showing each of those use cases, polyfills and internationalization.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, the 2 samples are already working. We are just trying to make them a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a really nice, it's something we could add as kind of baked into DoneJS at some point too, which I think would be really good. Internationalization, especially. Cool. Obaid, Bitballs is almost updated, right?
Yes, so Bitballs is updated to the latest CanJS and everything else, all the beauty with it. So it should be deployed today, and everything should be merged into master today, so everyone can look at it.
So I think there is one final thing that we're going to have to do for Bitballs, which is we're going to have to update the DoneJS guide so that when we release DoneJS 1.0, it will flip over to a Bitballs, like, new version of Bitballs with CanJS 3.
Okay.
Cool. All right. So topics. There's a bunch of topics. There's a decent number of topics listed this week. Does anybody have any topic that they want to talk about before we get into the posted topics? Just so we remember it. All right. Let's get into the posted topics, and we'll go by order of them posted. So, Adam, you want to talk about the generators to use the 2.0 style syntax of QUnit, or do we want to switch to other test frameworks? My opinion on that is yes, we should at least upgrade to the 2.0 style syntax for our QUnit generators. Regarding switching to Mocha, Jest, or Jasmine, there's actually an epic created for this to figure out like what to do with generators, which is something that Kevin's probably going to work on. We've had this discussion a few times. My opinion is I think we should have a generic generator, and then with code transforms and transpilers, we should have kind of simple ones that are able to maybe we make a basic transpiler from QUnit to Mocha, because those are the only way to really get to work, so you can support other syntaxes and other tabs versus spaces transpiling. That way we can kind of produce one thing, but we can have a wide variety of, especially if you want like QUnit, ES6, or QUnit like CommonJS plus tabs. Like you basically just take our default generator, but you layer on these 3 transpilers. It's the only way I see it as actually being manageable. Anybody have thoughts about this? I wish Kevin was here.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jillian.
Why do we need a code base and transpile that into different testing frameworks? Why do we don't have, for any testing framework, a generator that generates that test for that testing framework?
It's because of it's because of the compounding, like it's a combinations problem. So we could make a Mocha, Jest, or Jasmine generator where everything else was the same, ES6, but then let's say someone wanted to use AMD or CommonJS as their syntax, their module syntax. Well, then we would need a Mocha, Jest, or Jasmine built in ES or in CommonJS as well. So like,
why should, other question, why should somebody change or why is it important to change the syntax for AMD or ES6? Maybe our generator generates ES6. So
that's what it does currently, yeah.
So why should we support AMD?
Well, not necessarily AMD. I think CommonJS is reasonable to support CommonJS because ES6 module spec still isn't hardened, and there's a good chance that everybody writing ES6 code is going to have to rewrite all of their module names unless they use something to like fix it all. So personally, I always use CommonJS. That's why CanJS uses it, because I know that's like a standard that is going to exist for years, and very unlikely I'm gonna have to rewrite that. So,
but I think that there's a hard work for compiling into different syntaxes. So I prefer that we only support ES6, and if somebody wants to take CommonJS, he has to write his own generator or write or rewrite a test, because I think ES6 is the future, and CommonJS is a Node standard, okay, but it's never gone in the browser, right? So it's only for the people who are working on Node.js, so they are familiar with that. But I think the ES6 part is a future, and we should support that. And I think it's the best way to say we use ES6 for our tests, and if you don't like it, write your own generator or rewrite your test, because I think it's a hard work, and I don't think it's.
But the choice of ES6 versus CommonJS is kind of it's related, but not totally like there's a slight orthogonality to that, because the argument that I'm more making is there might be other options that we eventually want to support, other axes of, you know, I want to generate it with, I don't know, I want to use a different template engine instead of Stash or something, or I don't know. There's tabs versus space is another example. If we do want to support a wide variety of options, once you start multiplying those options, then you're having, like, you know, if you have like 3 options on one axis, 2 options on another, 2 options on another, you got 2 times 2 times 3, you got 12 different generators to make. Or you write 3 different transpilers and then every option works. Well, I guess it's technically like 3 transpilers, 2 transpilers, 2 transpilers. Still, you're writing 7 things instead of 12. The numbers just bear out.
Yeah, but it's harder for writing transpilers or writing generators, right?
Absolutely, but it's that's why we're not. I guess at this point, I don't think we've made this. We're not making a decision really until Kevin digs his teeth into it more, and we get kind of closer. That's why there's an epic, and we will discuss this a lot more. I think we have to have a. I think we really should just kind of survey it out, like how important are the different options, what are the potential options, and then figure out a time to produce that. If it's easy enough to create your own generators, then I think people should just do that. Like, we really should. I was just talking about this with Chasen earlier today. If we can get people to just say, hey, the process is going to be, you want your own generator, fork this repository, rewrite it, and then just publish that, and then you leave it to the community to create those 12 different combinations. We support this one, but it's an easy project to fork and make your changes in. And then you're like, you know, you're doing it that way.
That sounds like the far better way, because like then you don't have the, you know, exponential problem you're talking about, but also just like if we really support like making it really easy to just like, here, you've created your own, then no matter what happens in the future, like what new libraries come out, and we don't care, right? Like, yeah. I think that's the best plan.
You still have the exponential problem. You're just applying, like, hopefully an exponential workforce.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're right. There's still the exponential problem, but presumably anybody who needed it could. Yeah. They could just write it.
Yeah. I agree. I like that. I like that opinion more than writing in transpiler.
Now, I will say though, all the transpilers for CommonJS and ES6 are already written in AMD, because Steel has that. And it actually wasn't that hard to write those because of tools like Esprima. We wrote a light wrapper in Esprima where you can basically pass it an object that, like, hey, when the AST matches this object, then call this function, and whatever that function returns gets inserted in place, or can make mutations to the AST in place, and then that gets written out. That's actually not, I mean, each one of those is maybe 100 lines of code. It's not a terrible thing to write those kind of transpilers.
So for the different testing libraries, then we'd have some sort of AST as like, oh, here's the before each, here's the test itself, and here's the assertion, and then we would just transpile into all the different testing libraries from that strange AST sort of thing?
Yeah, you would say take one of them as a base, and then you have what actually it's still transpile, by the way. If anybody like wants to take, I wrote it, so I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that. It is pretty cool because all you do is you provide it like certain, like you provide it like a AMD to CommonJS, and you can provide it a ES6 to AMD, and what it can actually do is analyze that like graph and figure out, oh, if I transpile from AMD to CommonJS, I can go CommonJS to ES6 or whatever. It can do that, so you don't have to provide every you know, edge in that network. You just provide a minimal set, and it will figure that out. So I'm a fan of that. That's also why I push for it, because I think it worked pretty well for Steel. But I think we'll discuss this more in the more in the future, especially when Kevin's involved, because he's probably the person who's going to be doing the work. And yeah, okay, cool. Anything else about that? Okay, so the next one is that I posted was about using decorators. This is just in regards to can validate, which is being worked on right now, and then I realized the same kind of idea should probably be applied to can stream, and then can backup. And let me share my screen just because it'll maybe. How did that get on my calendar? Crazy. So the idea is, well, if you've never seen decorators, a lot of times people show them on functions, but decorators can be used on constructors and classes. So like here's a comic book character, and this is kind of mixing in utility belt and superpowers into it. I think that it'd be wise for us, especially if, I don't know if Adam, you got a response from Matthew about this, but will Steel 1.0 support, because it will support a version of Babel that supports this? Will that be possible?
I don't know. I think so, because the idea is that we should be able to put Babel plugins, right? And if we can add Babel plugins, then there is a Babel decorator plugin that can work. But as of right now, no. But I hope so.
Okay. So I'm thinking it'd be very nice for like a DoneJS 1.1 or something like that, where backup, event stream, possibly can define itself are all decorator based around classes. And even if this isn't while this isn't supported currently in kind of our workflows, we could still make it reasonable, because these decorators, you basically have this kind of double function call. So you could make a class, and you could say, oh, this is a can define class, and then it's backed up, and then it supports event streams, and then it supports validators as well. And you could do it like this. I'm wondering if we should, while, the 3.0 versions of stream and validate and things like that are being reasoned about, if we should pave a road towards this sooner than later.
Yes. Yes, we should.
Okay.
Yeah, how do you think we can do that?
I forgot. I don't know what version of. I think the good thing is that. Well, there's one other thing there's one compounding. Oh, it doesn't have its package, does it? Oh, this does. Okay, good. So, well, how we can do that is we just, and I'm glad we didn't release a major version of can stream. We can just release a new version of can stream or can define stream that is going to, work like this. Instead of mixing itself into can define map or into define map, it takes a define map and mixes itself into that individual constructor function. And backup and validate the new can validate would do the same thing. Can define is going to be a little trickier, although actually can define already can take a constructor function and work. It's not currently designed to do this double function call, because the thing is these generators can take arguments themselves, but they return a function that takes the constructor or whatever it's kind of adding its mix-ins. So that's why it's this weird double function. Can define doesn't want that. It'd be cool. Maybe there's a way we can tell if what the arguments are, if it's just being called straight away. for can define, so we can not have to break backwards compatibility. It could still work. It just noticed like, hey, I wasn't called with anything, so I'm just going to return myself essentially to be able to handle this. But we could start doing that and tell this is how people should use these things.
Gotcha. Okay, so that's what you mean when you say we can start adding like preliminary supports for being able to use decorators in the future by like creating that pattern now.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like enforcing it, and the reason also, like there's a really strong reason to use decorators that I might not have mentioned, which is the way like something like Stream works right now is it's going to infect a entire application's can define object or define map object, right? So if you've got another, let's say there's a new version of Stream 2.0 came out, or there's something else that wants to like make a Stream property. Those two things would not be able to exist in the same application at the same time. What I really want for CanJS 3.0, which is like why we're, big part of why we built it the way we built it, is that a module that you write, given the dependencies it expects, should always work. And just because some other module does things, it should not affect the behavior of the module that you're looking at. And the current way we built a lot of these mix-ins, especially these ones, violate that principle. And I want to get away from that. And this mix-in thing is a good way of, or decorators, and even just treating things like mix-ins can be a good way of doing that. So I will assume that that's a good a good direction to take, and we will, as we're building these other plugins, I will start shifting them to take this approach.
Yeah, I think moving from having it requiring a module implicitly changes a bunch of other stuff versus explicitly affecting exactly what you want when you bring in the module is a way better pattern. Right? And that's what this is, yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Depending on how those decorators are written. But two things you might want to consider too when we think about this. One, if the decorator doesn't take options, that's a possibility too. You don't need that first one. It can just be a function that operates on it. And then the way you use it is decorate. You just use at and the decorator name without the extra brackets. If it doesn't take options, so you can use that.
This doesn't have to be written. I thought it does have to be written to always like do the double function thing.
It doesn't actually, but then if you want it to be able to take options, the decorator to be able to take options, it has to be written that way, but it doesn't.
Okay, so it can't just be a function. It can't just be okay, perfect. Then can define is already a decorator then.
Yeah. Yeah. About that, I'm not sure how that's going to work the way you're thinking with, like if you import can define here and decorate it, and then it's imported somewhere else and not decorated, if they would still not, I'm not sure that would work if you're actually affecting the class, if you change anything. Anyway, the
normal can define function takes a constructor function and just decorates. No, it just decorates. It just adds a bunch of getters setters to it.
Right, so that would still, no matter where that was imported, it would still affect the class as a whole that it just decorated. Like you'd still have that infection problem, wouldn't you?
No, because it's only infecting the class that it was added to.
Right, but if that class was imported somewhere else, like if it's not a way to make a subclass, basically. Like it's not going to work that way. If you import something in this file and you import something in another file, and in the first file it's decorated, in the other file.
Oh, sure. Yeah, but that's a different. How do I say this? That's outside the scope. Like what we're trying to do is make it so our stuff doesn't infect anything. If people want to like make infections themselves, if you get what I'm saying, like that's up to them. right? I guess what I'm saying is our stuff should only modify this. It's not going to modify like, there's not going to be hidden infections. This only modifies something. It doesn't modify something else like internal that, isn't obvious. Does that make sense?
No, but
Okay. You understand how backup works right now?
no.
Okay. Or stream. Backup adds to define map prototype a backup function. So every single define map type is going to have a backup function. That's very different than just saying we're going to just add a backup function to something.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. No, I get what you're saying now. The second thing to consider too, maybe, and I don't think this, I'm a big fan of decorators, and I think we should support them because they're in TypeScript. There's a Babel plugin for them. But the reason Babel doesn't have them in its stage 2 already, because it is stage 2 in the ECMAScript standards. It's at stage 2, which is 3 is almost there and 4 is accepted. Is that they're expecting changes, and they haven't. It's this next meeting that's happening in December that they're gonna possibly talk about how decorators are gonna change. They probably won't change too much because TypeScript has had them for a really long time, and they probably don't want to mess with that. But there is the possibility that they will get changed in December, like the API for how they work. I'm still all for it, but I just thought we should consider that.
Yeah, at a minimum, though, if we're just exporting functions that take a constructor and then do things to it, we're just making mixins essentially.
Yeah.
And I think no matter what it evolves to, I don't think we'll be in necessarily a bad space. I just think that's a better practice to get people used to doing that kind of thing. Okay. So then the thing that I really wanted to talk about was how does ecosystem changes to ecosystem change CanJS's version number? And are they related? Are they related the same way that everything in core and infrastructure and potentially legacy would be?
I don't think they should be related, no.
That's my thought is that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how they should evolve with CanJS. Part of me feels like, well, I'm glad this, it's easy to just release a new 1.0 version, and that could bump up this to 3.2, and that's not so bad. But these things will have breaking changes at a much higher rate than your core stuff. And I want this to be kind of like a grab bag where it's a lot of things could be added, but we're not, there's a looser constraint on the things that are going on here than would in core. I'm almost considering moving Can Fixture into core because I do consider that something that it is super well dependent on. And I don't know, I was thinking about this as I was thinking about changing the behavior of things in here.
Question, are the modules included in ecosystem in the main Can package, the Can module or CanJS module?
Well, remember, I don't actually know. There's 2 cans, right? There's Can core, which I think is just actually the Can module, and then there's can.all, which gets produced, which is everything plus ecosystem. So I don't think they're actually in the Can module. We can actually look. No, just core is in the Can module.
Okay, I think that provides our answer that we wouldn't bump the main Can modules version number for stuff that's not included in it.
So what I feel like we should do, because when we make it, we need to make, if I added a new ecosystem, then there is something, right? Because we need to make a new release because a new Can.all gets released, the website gets updated with this new functionality, and in some ways, your API determines. So I do think we need to have some kind of. Part of me almost felt like what we treat these as is almost like pre-releases of everything, how I almost thought to shift it down would be okay, but I think that's getting really weird. But If I added something new to the ecosystem, well, that's like a new feature. Or if a new ecosystem changes, it's like we're going to bump to 3.2. If we're breaking APIs here, but we're not going to like release a 4.0 for a breaking change of the ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't know.
So the ecosystem stuff does get included in can.all. So is that just part of the can modules? Like, I guess my question before was meant to say, when there's a new version of CanJS, if I bring in all of CanJS instead of having it split out, are the ecosystem modules included in that version of CanJS?
They're listed as dependencies, but they're not part of the can module itself. So they're part of can-all, but can't like, so yes and no is the answer.
Okay. I think if we
we are dependent on the ecosystem stuff.
There are dependencies, yeah.
Oh, that does complicate things.
Yeah, it does, and so that's the issue. Is like part of it is, yeah, it does complicate things. Like I don't want. The problem is, I feel like if we bring it into CanJS, like officially, that these things can affect the version number, then it's going to make us far less likely to start adding things in here. Because then it's like we're really owning them, and I don't want that, right? I want a place where it's like these things, we do test against all of these things. We do run this as part of our test to make sure they're all working. And that they're working with, like, alongside all of the core for a specific version of CanJS. But that's like the only contract I really want to place on these things is like, hey, if you use CanFixture 1.07 alongside core can connect 1012, yes, those are going to work perfectly fine together in every single browser. But I don't want to like do more than that, I guess.
So what's about if we make a ecosystem bundle package, or a repo that contains all the ecosystems, and if there's a breaking change or there's a major update for each of that ecosystem, then we bump up the version of the ecosystem bundle, and then we say, okay, if the ecosystem bundle have a breaking change or a major update, then we update our CanJS release that's depend on that ecosystem bundle.
Well, the CanJS doesn't depend on ecosystem ever. Like nothing in core depends on the ecosystem. So, but what you're saying is actually a good idea. We could just have a different can ecosystem that we could have that. We'd probably still make it a dependency of CanJS, can ecosystem, but mostly just so that we don't have, because we can get all the documentation in one place. But that could have its own version number, kind of independent of CanJS, and that would, go up kind of high, and could be updated like with the, kind of the sum of its parts. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I don't know.
So from a different angle, what if like CanJS was not dependent on ecosystem at all? There was a separate package called can-all that you can implement that did have that dependency. Can-all bumped up every time, and then ecosystem was just, the Wild West. It can go up whatever breaking changes it needs and whatever. But you have some sort of like named, nicknamed release pattern where like, this belongs to, this will work with Can 1.0 or 3.0. This will work with Can 4.0. This will work with Can 5.0. But other than that, just like, because can-all is really the only problem, right? Otherwise, ecosystem could be the Wild West when it comes to versions. I
guess to me, I don't consider can-all really part of this at all. Mostly because can-all is not something people should ever be using except to make JS bins.
Right, so that can be like its own package is what I mean. Like, and then, that can bump up however you want. But like, it seems to me then that CAN core shouldn't even like care about ecosystem. Ecosystem should depend on CAN rather than the reverse. That's my
It does. No, ecosystem does depend on.
right. So then, what does it matter like how they go up? I guess maybe I misunderstood the problem. But why do we need to bump a CAN.js core version every time an ecosystem major version bump?
Well, why do we is because of management and how the project is organized. That's why. It's like how it's all related to like how this whole site and CAN.js is organized inside the CAN.js repo. But we can change that. We can change.
Is it something we can change then? Because that seems like the better option is just to have ecosystem be crazy. And like I said, named releases might be interesting. Like if you had something like, CAN 3.0 was, I'm going to say Pegasus, and then all the ecosystem stuff can like work with Pegasus, and then CAN 4.0 comes out and it's like Dragon, and then the ecosystem can update, and if they do, then you can still do like,
Well, the thing about ecosystems is it really shouldn't depend on any version of CAN.js. It really should depend on a certain set of modules or packages itself. Like CAN ecosystem should never point at a CAN.js release. It should point at like CAN Connect, CAN Component, and CAN something else, certain releases of that.
Yeah, so actually, well, I guess it's the problem.
It's more just like a list
to work together, though, right? Like that's where the problem comes in, because
a
you're
little
like,
bit.
I want this one, and this one, but these two versions don't work together with each other.
Yeah, that can happen. That can happen in some ways. Like CAN.js is more like to say, hey, these are all kind of tested together, and it is verified as one bundle, the core and the ecosystem. Like that, the dependencies are not going to cause the kind of problems you just mentioned. This is like a set that actually all can work with each other. Yeah, I don't know. In some ways, it's like, there's. In some ways, what it really means is like we should just remove this CAN.js version here, and then we should just move it to the core and move it to the ecosystem, and probably not even anything for here. And eventually, maybe it's just like this actually shouldn't even exist. Like 3.1, all it means is like it's a version where it all works together. Maybe that you're saying that's like CAN all, or maybe we make CAN.js like another way is just saying CAN.js just represents this. But yeah, okay. Anyways, let's move on. We've talked about this enough. I don't think I've come to any conclusions, but I think it's something to think about in the future that we'll keep talking about. And when the rubber hits the road, then we'll probably have to start making decisions when this eventually comes up for real. Any other topics people want to talk about? All right. Thanks, everybody. See you all next week. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Hi, guys.